This is episode 392 of That Shakespeare Life.
Hi, I'm Toby Capwell, curator of Arms and Armour at the Wallace Collection in London. Another great method for studying the life of William Shakespeare includes listening to this. It's That Shakespeare Life with my friend, Cassidy Cash.
Welcome to That Shakespeare Life with Cassidy Cash. Cassidy believes that if you desire to successfully learn or perform Shakespeare's plays, then understanding the real life and history of William Shakespeare himself is a must. That Shakespeare Life is the podcast that helps you go beyond the curtain of some of Shakespeare's most iconic works and explore the world of early modern England as Shakespeare would have lived it, learning from the writers, historians, and performers who know it best. And now, here's Cassidy.
This week, we're dipping into the strange, the enchanted, and the eerily familiar with a sampling of the rich world of 16th century folklore during Shakespeare's lifetime. From medieval hares and charmed pilgrim tokens to tales of mermaids, dragons, and accidental witchcraft, the folklore of this era reveals a world both magical and deeply human. To help us explore the kinds of beliefs that shaped everyday life and occasionally show up in Shakespeare's plays, we're joined by two leading voices in folklore studies, Owen Davies and Ceri Houlbrook, co-authors of the new book, Folklore. Rather than a deep dive into any one custom, today's conversation offers a look at a few of several fascinating traditions and superstitions that colored Shakespeare's world. Today, we're joined by two of the foremost experts in folklore, Owen Davies and Ceri Houlbrook. Owen is a professor of history at the University of Hertfordshire and leading author on the history of witchcraft, magic, and folklore. Ceri is an expert in the intersection of folklore and the early modern world, with a focus on belief systems and cultural practices. Together, they've co-authored the book Folklore, a compelling look that dives deep into the superstitions and magical beliefs that shaped Shakespeare's world. With their combined expertise, they're the perfect duo to guide us through the folklore woven into Shakespeare's plays. Before we get into the conversation today, I want to remind you that there are extras available for patrons of our show. You can see woodcuts, paintings, and museum artifacts all about folklore while you listen to the show. You can find these right now at cassidycash.com/episode 392. And now, let's dive into the history. Hello, Owen and Ceri. Welcome to That Shakespeare Life. I'm thrilled to have you both here with us. To help our listeners follow along, would you each mind saying your names so they can match your voice to who's speaking?
Hi, I'm Ceri.
And I'm Owen. I'm Professor of Social History at the University of Hertfordshire, and Ceri is?
I'm a senior lecturer in folklore and history at the University of Hertfordshire.
And they have both written the folklore book that we are here to discuss today. And they write about the cunning folk and fortune tellers in their book, saying that their advice sometimes led to what was called an accidental witch. Owen, tell us about how someone could be accused of being a witch accidentally. Was this a byproduct of following the advice of cunning folk?
No, absolutely. I mean, I've kind of over 30 years of research on witchcraft from the 16th century through to the 20th century, kind of come up with three categories of witch. And that's kind of a conflict witch, those that were actually tried and prosecuted, accusations were made against by community, outcast or folkloric witches, the kind of more stereotypical witch, and sometimes the allied. These aren't mutually exclusive categories. And then there's the other category of accidental witch, which historians and folklorists really haven't picked up on very much at all. And this is essentially when a cunning person, a wise woman, a wise man has a ritual to identify who a witch is. So, someone suspects their cattle are being bewitched. They go to a cunning man, pay their money. And the cunning man says, well, this is a kind of the normal sort of patter, whether it's in the 16th century or it's in the early 20th century. They basically go, well, I'm going to look in my bowl of water here, or I'm going to consult my books, or whatever it happens to be. And they basically come up with a formula, which is something like, when you go home now, lock the doors, put some salt around the room or whatever. It's variations depending from cunning folk to cunning folk, but essentially it's all the same. And then they say, well, the next person that comes to your door is the witch, right? Or it could be a witch bottle ritual. They say, well, here's the instructions to make a witch bottle. And as it's boiling, the first person that comes to your door, well, that's the witch. Or it could be boiling a heart. There's all sorts of different ways in which the ritual is done. And of course, during the course of the day or the night, who's going to come knocking at your door? It's probably your neighbor. It could be someone that you've had great relationships for years. But because you knocked at that door, or you turned up outside the window at the moment where the cunning folk has said, well, the first person who comes, then you instantly become accused of witchcraft. It doesn't matter how your reputation, you might have a none-blemished reputation. And from then on, your life is hell. But just because of this ritual. And of course, that's an accidental witch, but sometimes it doesn't go anywhere apart from the fact that your life is ruined because your reputation is ruined in your community.
Well, I should think that would be enough.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. But sometimes, so obviously in the witch trial era, that could lead to then becoming a conflict witch. In other words, it escalates to becoming a formal accusation. And then you become accused. So I think it's an interesting category. And it's purely based around these ritual divination, essentially divination rituals about who is the witch. Sad state of affairs. I mean, I've come across from across several centuries, I've come across terrible sort of accounts of people going, essentially saying, I knew this person, their life was ruined. Life was absolutely ruined because of this damn cunning person who came up with this stupid ritual,
So it'd be disastrous for anyone with poor timing.
Yeah, and it could be a man or a woman because it's completely random. But if you think about when it's done, if it's a ritual during the course of the day and you're a woman at home with domestic responsibilities in the dairy or looking after children, who's going to come knocking during the day? It's going to be another woman, very likely. So there's a clear gendered angle to this as well.
Well, the book Folklore doesn't only look at witches, of course. It also looks at several other kind of folkloric figures, including fantasy figures like mermaids and dragons. These regularly appear on historical map illustrations. And Owen, what made these images such a common feature for cartographers? How were they understood at the time? Did people believe that these creatures were real, or were they included just as artistic embellishments?
Well, it's both. And your podcast is all about Shakespearean times. It's during his times that there's a kind of a shift, certainly in educated culture going on in Britain at this time, whereby the whole idea of a world of giants, for example, or sea monsters was in kind of flux. So you get into in the 16th century, there are still educated people writing that it was an age of giants who formed the landscape, for example, right? There's giants in the Bible. There's giants in Viking sagas, there's good evidence for there's been giants. There's bones keep being dug up, which are actually mammoth bones, but they're interpreted as giants' bones. So there's physical evidence. So we're on a cusp of a time here where the idea of sea monsters and mermaids, giants, is all kind of still possible, and there's physical evidence out there. And you get to the 17th century, it starts shifting, but it's also still there. I mean, in the 17th century, people are still exhibiting mermaids. People are exhibiting bones as giants' bones from the age of the giants and stuff. But it is shifting. But in folklore, quite a lot of this stuff continues on. In other words, you can have interviews with farmers in the early 19th century, sort of saying, oh, well, up on the hills there, all those rocks, that was formed by giants, We do have this shift going on through the 17th century from, it falls out, the idea of giants and mermaids and sea monsters kind of falls out, but it carries on in folklore. But at the same time, when it comes to maps, that's a kind of a different issue, because there is a degree to which it becomes a cartographic tradition of sea monsters, The most influential is Olaus Magnus, the 16th century clergyman, Catholic clergyman. He ended up having to going to Italy because of the Reformation and Scandinavia. He had to leave and ended up back in Italy. But anyway, his map was hugely influential in the 16th century because he included all these sea monsters in the North Sea and the northern, even beyond Norway, basically in the northern reaches of the oceans. And he believed them. He believed in giants as well. He's one of the late kind of defenders of an age of giants. And he's also a defender that there are monsters out there in the sea. But his map, his visual representations are really important in the sense that it becomes part of cartographic tradition. If there are uncharted territories or little-known territories, let's do what Olaus did and stick a sea monster in, Let's stick a kraken in or whatever. In a sense, it becomes a symbol of deep, a bit like on Earth, there's wildernesses. That's where you find Grendel. That's where you find giants. They're in the vast wildernesses, and obviously areas of the sea which are little traversed. Then there's bound to be monsters and giants, and that can be reality for sailors. And the Kraken belief goes through into the 19th century. The idea, you even get stories of people landing on the Kraken and having a campfire or whatever, until they realize, oh dear, it's a sea monster.
I've always suspected that the Kraken was actually a giant squid.
Well, I mean, it could have been.
Just to give them some...
Yeah, well, that's kind of cryptid talk, isn't it? It's the idea of trying to find a reality for something which could be purely fantasy,
That's true. There's an entire chapter devoted to animal folklore, much of it tracing back to Pliny the Elder and Aristotle. One particularly intriguing detail involves rabbits. Owen, was there a belief in a lucky rabbit's foot in England for Shakespeare's lifetime?
No. I mean,
too bad.
Rabbits were introduced to Britain by the Normans, so don't date back. There has actually been some archaeological evidence that there may have been a few rabbits brought by the Romans. We're talking about not very many rabbits, but it's largely a Norman thing, and the Normans cultivated them. We have in the landscape, we have rabbit warrens, which are or pillow mounds, which are artificial mounds, which were there to foster and encourage the rabbits that have been introduced, so they could make burrows in it. And in place names today, we still have lots of places called warren, which this is after kind of rabbits, basically rabbit keeping for food. But what you do have is a long history of hare lore and hare folklore, and lots of people mistake the two. I mean, you ask many British people today, I don't think they could tell you the difference between a hare or a rabbit.
Well, that was going to be my next question so how do we tell the difference?
Well, all sorts. One, a hare is much bigger. Two, it has much bigger ears, has much longer legs, and it runs, it doesn't hop. And also a classic identifier, if you're driving around the English landscape and you see something that looks like a rabbit or a hare in the middle of a field, it'll be a hare, because their tactics are they run fast. Rabbits don't run fast. Hares run really fast. And so their tactic is they sit in the middle of the field, they can see everything going on. And if they see anything like a fox or a badger or a human, phoom, they're off. Whereas rabbits all congregate around the edges of fields because they know that they don't run fast. They can get into the hedge quickly or into their burrows quickly. So anyway, all sorts of ways you can identify, but most people don't know the difference between a hare and a rabbit. But hares have a long history going right back into obviously antiquity. But the idea you're probably getting at is the rabbit's foot, lucky rabbit's foot, which actually probably has a very clear history or development in America in the late 19th century and the First World War, because that's when it really became popular, the idea of a lucky rabbit's foot. There was an American entrepreneur around First World War time who basically killed millions of wild buck rabbits in America to make lucky charms, to sell on the market. So, yeah, they're two very different histories for an animal that people confuse very often.
So when we look and we see, I guess when we look at bestiaries, the things that look like rabbits, those are hares.
Yeah, I see that all the time on Twitter or Blue Sky. So, look at this rabbit on this medieval manuscript. And it's not. You can see it's a hare. It's got long ears. It's got long legs. It's a hare. I see it all the time,
Well, now we will know, and we won't make that mistake. And we definitely won't. We'll still steer clear.
This is one of Owen's pet peeves.
Oh, yeah.
I can tell. Yes, we need to get this one correct.
Yeah, absolutely.
Owen and Ceri write that one of the longest revered wells in Britain is St. Winifred's Well in Holywell, Wales, which was designated the National Shrine of England and Wales by the Catholic Church in 2023. Would you tell us about the legend associated with this location? How those legends caused Elizabeth I to order what was called a trial of the waters in 1579?
Absolutely. So, yeah, St. Winifred's Well is in honor of St. Winifred, who was a 7th century virgin martyr who, legend tells, refused the advances of a lustful suitor. And as seems to happen a lot with saints, she had her head chopped off.
No way, all the time.
all the time. And where her head landed, healing water sprung up and has apparently been flowing ever since. She was miraculously restored to life by her uncle as well. So a happy ending. But since probably about the 11th century, a structure has been built at that site and people have been...
I'm sorry, wait. I have to ask you to go back. St. Winifred had her head chopped off and then it was placed back on her body by her uncle and she lived? This is the story?
Yep.
Okay. Just wanted to
This is normal. This is normal in medieval legends. Absolutely
okay,
normal.
so this is normal saint behavior.
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So, all right. So the healing waters spring up, and then they are flowing. And now what happens?
Well, people go there. People go there to bathe in the water, to leave their offerings, to get cured from all kinds of ailments, including blindness. By the 14th century, it was receiving royal visits, so it was a very, very famous pilgrimage site. But obviously, during the English Reformation, with the veneration of Catholic saints being prohibited, pilgrimage to the site was kind of heavily discouraged. But it continued, and Elizabeth I, as you said, was concerned that people were still visiting the well in huge numbers. So she ordered this trial of the waters to see whether they actually worked, whether they possessed any medicinal properties whatsoever. I don't know how they tested, and I don't know what the results were, but she did say if it's got medicinal properties, if it does work, then fine. People can still visit the well, but only the sick are allowed access to it. But if the waters didn't possess kind of healing qualities, then local officials were told to deface the structure around the well and just to take it down, to pull it down. But it remained. So perhaps the trial worked. But yeah, the structure remained, and it's still today. People go there and at designated times bathe in the water of the holy well and hope for a cure.
So whatever happened there, they were at least able to provide enough evidence that, hey, if she comes back and she asks us, we can say that we didn't have a reason to tear it down.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the book, specifically on page 162, coins are described as being offered as oblations. Were certain coins believed to bring good luck or offer protection against misfortune?
Yeah, there were so many different kind of coin customs in Britain, hugely widespread and for lots and lots of different purposes. One of the most common was the bowed or the crooked coin, so a coin that had been deliberately bent or folded over or made crooked. This was most often used as a kind of sickbed rite. While saying prayers, coins would be bent over somebody who was sick, or a sick person would bend them while praying to a saint, asking for their help or a cure, and promising that in exchange for their prayer being answered, that person would take that specific coin, the one that they bent, and go to the saint's shrine and make that offering with that particular coin. So that's one of many. Another really popular one was the touch piece. So this was a coin that monarchs would use, and this ranged from kind of the 11th to the 18th centuries, where English monarchs would, as part of a big ceremony, would ritually touch people who were suffering from a form of tuberculosis known as the king's or queen's evil. It was named that because it was believed that only the king or queen could cure it. And as part of this big ceremony, the person suffering would be presented with a coin known as a touch piece, which was pierced with a hole and hung around the neck on a white ribbon. And they were meant to have to keep it on, because if they took it off, then the illness would return. In the 15th century, the coin that was being used was the angel. It was known as the angel, and it was a very, very small gold coin. And it was known as the angel because it had an image of the archangel Michael on one of the sides. So this was commonly used as a touch piece. It's referred to in Shakespeare's Macbeth, actually, where Malcolm is describing how the king would use a golden stamp in healing ceremonies. And he's talking there about the angel touch piece. I've got the quote here: "The mere despair of surgery he cures, hanging a golden stamp about their necks." So that's what he's referring to. Really interestingly, though, when I was to go back to St. Winifred's Well, when I was reading records, people who'd gone there seeking a cure with a coin, they weren't actually kind of putting the coin in the well as you would expect today. And certainly people were doing by the 20th century. They were actually giving the coins to a poor person they met there, or a poor person they met on the way. So it was kind of a alms giving, a kind of a token of charity in the name of the saint. So yeah, lots and lots of coin customs.
Domestic folklore includes traditions like carving pumpkins, writing letters to Father Christmas, or exchanging teeth for coins in the case of the tooth fairy. Are there earlier equivalents from Shakespeare's time, folk practices that are tied to holidays like Christmas or Halloween?
I really enjoyed researching this. I really enjoyed having a look at kind of customs that we're familiar with today and how Shakespeare might have experienced something similar. So Christmas, for instance, certainly wasn't a single day, but a kind of whole period of feasting, merrymaking, and very importantly, plays and masks. So they were very important during the Christmas period. And Shakespeare may well have attended these plays and masks and may well have performed some of his plays as Christmas plays. He wouldn't have had a Christmas tree. They didn't come to Britain until the 18th century. So instead, their houses were decorated with evergreens. One form of decoration was the kissing bough. So that was kind of like a ball of evergreens and mistletoe that were hung in doorways. And if you found yourself under one with somebody else, you were supposed to embrace. Not meant to be romantic at that time, just kind of, merrymaking. But yeah, mistletoe that you're supposed to kiss under today is kind of the descendant of that. He might have had turkey at Christmas time. Turkeys were introduced to Britain in the 16th century. And in the 16th century, turkeys were being listed amongst beef, mutton, pies, goose as kind of traditional Christmas fare. So, his Christmas dinner might have looked a little bit like ours. But one thing that I found really, really interesting as a kind of 16th century Christmas custom was one that was practiced by school children. So in the run-up to the Christmas period, Christmas holidays weren't guaranteed. It wasn't guaranteed that you were going to get time off to celebrate. So some school children would participate in a custom called barring out, where they would lock out the schoolmaster from the school or from the classroom as a kind of form of protest. And they'd only kind of admit them back in when the schoolmaster agreed to let them have some time off for Christmas. So I love the idea that Shakespeare's contemporaries might have doing sit-ins, as we would call them today. As for Halloween, so yeah, they were observing kind of Hallowmass, which encompassed All Saints' Eve, All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day. The practice of trick-or-treating probably comes from kind of a form of guising or mumming or souling, which was done on All Souls' Day, a day of remembrance for the dead, where people went around door to door, sometimes requesting food, sometimes requesting money, and sometimes in exchange for prayers for the deceased. So it was believed that the more people who were praying for your loved ones, the more comfort they'd have in the afterlife. So you can see how that's kind of like a distant ancestor of trick-or-treating. And it is mentioned in Shakespeare's Two Gentlemen of Verona, talking about puling, so whimpering like a beggar at Hallowmass is in reference to that. And they also had things like bonfires and dressing up in disguises at this time of the year. So again, the idea of kind of costumes for All Souls' Day is not totally unknown. But he wouldn't have carved pumpkins, even though they probably did have pumpkins around about that time, that were just over from America. Turnips were the usual thing to be carved as jack-o'-lanterns, and that was much more so in Ireland and Scotland than in England.
There's also a festival which was important in Shakespeare's time, which became less and less important, and that's Hocktide. Hocktide was the second week of Easter. It was a really important medieval time. It's kind of a slight slack period in the agricultural cycle, but also obviously connected to religious feasting and stuff. But in Shakespeare's time, it became particularly associated with the defeat of the Vikings, or the Danes, as they were called, till the 20th century. And so you get lots of mock battles about the Saxon defeat of the Danes then, and so you get quite a lot of performances going on, and that was really quite important and high profile. And you see Hocktide mentioned in quite a lot of Elizabethan and early Stuart literature.
One curious tradition involved hiding shoes in the home. What kind of beliefs were associated with this custom in the 16th century? And were fireplaces really a common hiding place for your shoes?
This is my favorite topic. I love concealed shoes. So yeah, we do have records of thousands of shoes that were found hidden within buildings. So that could be the backs of fireplaces. It could be up chimney breasts. It could be in walls, in the roof, under the floorboards. So just, concealed within the fabric of a building, all across the British Isles and beyond. So elsewhere in Europe, America, Australia. Often single shoes, but sometimes pairs of shoes and sometimes groups of singles. Northampton Shoe Museum, have been keeping a kind of an index of concealed shoes ever since the 1950s. So that's kind of where we get a lot of our information about them from. And they've got records of thousands. And the number continues to grow. So, somebody's renovating their house, opening up an old fireplace, demolishing a building. That tends to be when these shoes are found. We have a lot more shoes from the 18th and 19th centuries. There are some from the 16th, but the Northampton Museum only has records of 28 examples in Britain that are from the 16th century. But these are probably just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, remember, a lot won't have survived. A lot will have been thrown away. The building was demolished, and others probably still haven't been found yet. So there will be more than 28 out there. And we don't know why they were hidden. We just don't know. We don't have written records from the time explaining why people were shoving their shoes up chimneys. But later folklore suggests that the shoes were considered lucky, and keeping them within the house was considered to bring luck either to the people or to the household. We have a reference, Owen found a great reference from 1937 from a curator at Colchester and Essex Museum who wrote a letter to the Folklore Journal saying that he knew of 3 examples of 16th century shoes that had been found in Elizabethan fireplaces. And he wrote, quoting, "I have always understood that this was intended to bring good luck to the house." So this is one of the earliest known kind of explanations for the custom. Obviously, this is the 20th century as opposed to the 16th. We don't know why people were hiding them in the 16th century. It's one of those things that just remains a mystery.
The worn shoe has quite a long history. The idea of a worn shoe as being associated with journeys, it has a long history.
We have a tradition here in the US, and I don't actually know if it's there in the UK, but the idea of hanging a horseshoe on the wall of your house, a lot of people will actually hang it over the entrance of their house as a way to bring good luck to the house. That's the tradition. And it sounds like somewhere along the way, putting a shoe into the wall of your house is a similar practice, just to give some context for anyone that's new to this idea of why would you put a shoe in your house. It's that idea of just a token or something that, well, it can't hurt to try this out. Throw the penny in the fountain, put the shoe in the wall. It's all the same kind of focus.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know the level of belief that was behind it, whether it was just done because this is what you do.
Sure, it could be tradition as opposed to really believing any kind of luck was associated as well.
In Shakespeare's time, the horseshoe was a really important anti-witch device. Seriously, it was one of the top anti-witch devices. And it's through the 19th century that it becomes more about luck as witchcraft becomes less of an issue. But you look in the 16th and 17th century sources, people they're in the witch trials, they're in literature, and it's all about they are against witches, and that it becomes less about witches as time goes on.
So they would hang horseshoes on the outside of their home, but not for luck, but to bar the witches from entering.
Yeah. There's a court case, Assizes witch trial from Essex in the late 16th century, where basically in the evidence depositions they say, well, basically we got the woman we suspected was a witch, and we had a horseshoe over our door. We forced her to try and go through the door. They literally pushed her so that the horseshoe would have its impact. And there's other trials where they put a horseshoe into the barrels of beer that was soured that were thought to be caused by the witch, and so it was the sympathetic magic. So the horseshoe being plunged, the boiling, the iron hot horseshoe being plunged in. So they are very clear. It's really clear that this was important for witches. Yeah.
We have only just touched the very surface of all that is available to uncover in the book about folklore and other traditions, including May Day celebrations, mumming, mop fairs, among so much more that shows up in Owen and Ceri's latest book. It is titled simply Folklore, and it is a great place to check out more of this history. And you can get a copy of this book wherever books are sold, as well as I will have a link directly to it in the show notes for today's episode. But Owen and Ceri, we would like to ask you to share with us if we're excited by the idea of folklore history, especially related to William Shakespeare, and we want to dive in and learn more about it. In addition to your book, Folklore, where should we look to learn more?
I mean, I'd recommend anything by Ronald Hutton. Yeah. The Stations of the Sun, A History of the Ritual Year in Britain is a really, really good resource and a fascinating read. And also Jacqueline Simpson and Stephen Roud's Dictionary of English Folklore is a really useful go-to reference book, which gives you kind of the primary sources to kind of delve deeper into your investigations. So yeah, those are probably my top 2.
Absolutely. Completely endorse those. If you'd asked me, I'd have said the same thing. Yeah.
Owen and Ceri have also written another article that is probably not directly a companion, but worth reading in this context. It's called Building Magic, Ritual and Reenchantment in Post-Medieval Structures. We will place links to their book, this article, and the resources from Ronald Hutton, as well as the others, the Dictionary of English Folklore, all in the show notes for today's episode. So stay tuned for the URL for where to find those. Owen and Ceri, we ask everyone this next question here at That Shakespeare Life, and that's, what's the one book you would take with you on a deserted island? My friends in England tell me I'm supposed to allow you the complete works of Shakespeare and a copy of the Bible, so your choice would be in addition to those. We saved the toughest question for last.
A whole shelf full of books, or multiple shelf full of books. Thing is, I work across a lot of periods, and to pick on one would be to kind of privilege one period of in the history of witchcraft and magic over another.
Can't show favorites.
No. I mean, in terms of folklore, there's a big book called Law of the Land, which was by Jennifer Westwood and Jacqueline Simpson, which is like a gazetteer of folklore across the country. That has historical material going back to Shakespeare's time right through to the present. And it's a great book for dipping into and finding out the law wherever you happen to be as a tourist or as a resident.
A very appropriate choice for our topic today, and quite useful too if you're not quite sure what you know or don't know about where you're landing on your deserted island. Then I could see that working very well for you. What about you, Ceri? What would you take with you on your deserted island?
I've put a lot of thought into this. Yeah, I drew up a long list, then narrowed it down to a short list. And unlike Owen, I've just gone for a simple escapist fiction. So I'm just going to enjoy the desert island. Yeah, I wanted something big. Size matters. If you're stuck on a desert island, you need a big book. So I've gone for one of my all-time favorites, which was Stephen King's The Stand, which is huge, epic, post-apocalyptic fantasy. Good versus evil, and probably the best villain of all times. So yeah, I can always reread
all
that.
Time. Okay.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I think those are good choices for your deserted island. Well, what are you guys working on next? What are you into that you are excited about?
I'm currently writing on the folklore and the British landscape. So that's taking me back into all sorts of things to do with Robin Hood and Lover's Leaps and Evil Danes and many other things. Very
exciting stuff. We'll look forward to seeing that come to life. Ceri, what are you working on now that you're excited about?
Well, both me and Owen are working on the National Folklore Survey with Sheffield Hallam University. So we're kind of surveying people across the country to get a snapshot of what folklore is being practiced today. So to really kind of get an idea of kind of multicultural Britain and what folklore means in the 21st century. But also I'm spending every spare minute writing kind of cheesy fiction and putting my love of folklore into stories. So yeah, that's what I'm excited about going into the summer.
She says it's cheesy. She says it's cheesy, but I've read some of it. It's very good.
Thank you. It can be cheesy and good, though. So
true,
yeah.
Very true.
Well, it all sounds like fascinating stuff. We'll look forward to seeing what comes next. Thank you so much, Owen Davies and Ceri Houlbrook, for being here this week to share with us a little slice of what folklore was like for Shakespeare's lifetime and helping us understand that part of his lifetime this much better. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Cassidy.
Thank you.
That's it for today's journey into the enchanted corners of Shakespeare's world. A huge thank you to Owen Davies and Ceri Houlbrook for sharing their insight and stories from Folklore, a book we highly recommend if you want to dive even deeper into this topic. If you're curious to learn more about the customs we touched on today, or you want to explore the resources our guest mentioned, head over to the show notes page. We've gathered several extras there for you, including links to further reading, related episodes, and access to our patrons-only area that includes the bonus history content you can explore while you listen to the show. If you love the life of William Shakespeare and you'd like to go one step further beyond listening to our show, you can actually try out the history you learn about here on That Shakespeare Life by joining Experience Shakespeare on Patreon. Our Experience Shakespeare program invites you to cook, play, and create your way through the life of William Shakespeare with hands-on activity kits that show you how to complete games, recipes, and crafts straight from the 16th century, just like what Shakespeare would have had himself. Find all of these things waiting for you right now at CassidyCash.com/episode 392. That's CassidyCash.com/EP392. Until next time, keep your eyes open for mermaids, your coins appropriately crooked, and if you'd like to ward off witches from your house, don't forget to hang up that horseshoe. Thank you for listening. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to That Shakespeare Life. As always, the best conversations happen after the episode over at CassidyCash.com. Become a part of a vibrant Shakespeare conversation by adding your voice over at the website. Until next time, remember, when you want to know William Shakespeare, you have to go behind the curtain and into That Shakespeare Life.